Hi guys. So from here on out, we're kind of going to be doing something different with your NTI work. Everything is just going to be a review of stuff that you've seen before, just to kind of make sure that you've got a solid grasp on the really important stuff that we learned in Algebra 2. Okay? So first thing that we're going to start off with is linear functions, which is a fancy way of just saying lines. Okay? So example A says find a linear equation to represent the data table below. So how do I know that this table represents a line? Well, first of all, top row says x, so let's look at what the x's are doing. They're going up by 1 every single time. Well, the bottom row, even though it says g of x, that is another way of saying y. What are my y values doing? Well, they're going up by 7 every time. Because these numbers are doing the same thing every time, on top and on bottom, that's how I know this is a line. Okay? And what those numbers represent, so the fact that it's going up by 7 in the y values and by 1 in the x values, those two numbers make up my slope. Okay? Rise over run. So rise comes from your y values, run comes from your x values. So your slope here is going to be up 7 over 1. So when I start to think about how I write the equation of a line, okay, y equals 7x is the first part of it. And you could put 7 over 1 if you wanted to, but that's the same thing as just 7. Your slope always goes with x. Well, there's one other thing that you have to know to write the equation of a line, and that's what is your y-intercept. Well, your y-intercept, if you were to graph this line, is wherever the line crosses the y-axis. Well, when a line crosses the y-axis, x is always 0. So right here where x is 0, y happens to be 10. That 10 is my y-intercept. So I'm going to put a plus 10 on the end of this equation, and there's my line. Y equals 7x plus 10. So what that's telling me is if I wanted to go graph it, I'd put a dot on 10 on the y-axis, and then I'd be going up 7 over 1, up 7 over 1, and I'd be putting a new dot every time. Okay? Let's say I look at example B. Example B says find a solution to the system of equations below. So just a couple words that I want to define there. The word system just means that you have more than one of something. Okay, we can see we've got two equations there. A solution means where do those two things intersect? Well, Desmos makes that really, really easy to find. All I have to do is let Desmos graph it for me. So I have negative 7x plus 2y equals 18. There's my first line. My second line is 6x plus 6y equals 0. Oh, there we go. And all I have to do is click on this dot right here where they intersect, and there's my solution. And that solution is a point, okay? Make sure you write it that way in parentheses. So on example B, my answer right here in parentheses is negative 2, comma 2. And then I'm done. Now, something I want to point out to you that some of you may have noticed, whenever we were doing this by hand, we always said that you have to get y by itself. That is still true if you are graphing things by hand or if you're using a graphing calculator. One really nice perk about Desmos is Desmos does not make you get y by itself before you graph things. Okay, so there's a little perk there, a little shortcut. Very last thing we'll talk about for this section, example C says write a system of inequalities to represent the graph below. That word inequalities there just means that you have shading on your graph. It means that you're not just going to have an equal sign when you write out the equation for these lines. You're going to have either a greater than symbol or a less than symbol, okay? And it doesn't matter which line you start with. We'll pick the purple one first, and we'll write its equation. So we always start with writing y first. First thing I want you to notice on this purple line, okay, is where is the shading? Well, if I put my finger or my cursor anywhere on this purple line, to get to the purple shading, I have to go up. Well, up on a graph means numbers get bigger, so this line is going to have a greater than symbol with it in its equation, okay? The next thing I want you to notice is that this line is dotted. That dotted line means it's not equal to, it's just greater than. So there will not be a little line underneath this greater than symbol. It's just going to sit there like it is, okay? Well, just like we did for that data table, I need to know two things about this line. What's my slope and what's my y-intercept? Well, the easiest thing to find is the y-intercept. Here it is right here on the purple line. It's at negative 2. So I type a negative 2 in my equation. And then from -2, how would I get to the next point? Or how would I get to the next whole number? Well, the next whole number point that I can find is over here at 4, 1. Okay? So I'm going to start here at my y-intercept and count over to the next point, to 4, 1. Well, to do that, I have to go up 1, 2, 3, and over 1, 2, 3, 4. That right there is my slope, okay? And it's written as a fraction. I had to go up 3, so 3 goes on top, and over 4. So I write 3 over 4. And my slope always sits with x in my equation. And there's my equation for the purple line, okay? Then I'm going to go to the orange line, and I'll write an equation for it. All right. So with this orange line, the first thing I want to look at is if I put my cursor or my finger anywhere on this line, to get to the orange shading, I have to go down. Well, on a graph, numbers get smaller or they get lesser as you go down. So this line is going to have a less than symbol in its equation. But the other thing I want you to notice here is that the orange line is solid. That means it is equal to. So when I type in the less than symbol, it's going to have a line underneath it. So if it's a solid line on my graph, it gets a solid line in the equation. Okay? Right underneath that less than symbol. And now, just like the purple line, I need my slope and my y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept is the easiest thing to find. Boom, it's right here at 1. So I put a plus 1 at the end of my equation because it's positive. And I say, okay, from there, what's my slope? How do I get to the next point? Well, the next whole number point is right here where it crosses right at a corner at 1, -1. So how do I get there from my y-intercept? Well, I go down 1, 2, and over 1. So what does that mean for my slope? Well, I went down 2, so that's a -2. Okay. And I can put it over 1, I don't have to. But then slope always goes with x. And right there, I'm done. There's my 2 inequalities. Okay? So go ahead, get started on today's Google form, and let me know if you have questions.